Time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines across the globe this week. And we'll start here in Nigeria when the Senate this week approved for second reading a bill for the amendment of the 2024 Appropriation Act as President Bola Tinubu sought an additional 6.2 trillion naira to fund the 2024 budget. President Tinubu's request for the additional sum will increase the size of the 2024 budget from 27.5 trillion naira to 33.7 trillion naira if approved. In a letter read by Senate President Godswill Akpabio, the president explained that the Appropriation Act Amendment Bill 2024 aims to allocate 3.2 trillion naira for infrastructure projects, including Renew Hope initiatives, and 3 trillion for recurrent expenditure. The president also seeks to amend the Finance Act of 2023 to impose a one-time windfall tax on foreign exchange gains realized by banks in 2023, adding that the tax will fund capital infrastructure development, education, healthcare, and other welfare initiatives. The two amendment bills were granted accelerated hearing and passed for second reading after a debate on their general principles.
Seeks to amend the Principal Act to provide the sum of 3 trillion 200 billion only for Renewed Hope infrastructure projects and other critical infrastructure projects to be undertaken across the country, and the sum of 3 trillion only to meet further recurrent expenditure requirements necessary for the proper operation of the federal government, expenditure which are to be funded by expected revenues accruing to the federal government of Nigeria.
Well, some people say that the president will soon tax the air out of our lungs and introduce an oxygen tax with the increasing taxes. Obviously, you know, previously we had the cyber security levy, which was promptly stepped down. However, it does seem as though the president seems insensitive to the current plight of Nigeria as one-time windfall tax for the banks to fund infrastructure development. Again, are these to fund white elephant projects, or are these to fund projects that are actually going to impact the daily lives of Nigerians and actually make our lives better? It's yet to be seen. We're having an increase in the budget. We're still going to have another supplementary budget that is going to be introduced before the end of the year, I believe. How many budgets are we running concurrently right now?
Well, I mean, for me, this I think the way to approach this development is to look critically at the manner in which the Senate President Godswill Akpabio read that letter, you know, to the members of the Senate. That will probably qualify it as the worst reading, in my opinion, by any Senate President. It looked to me like he was unsure of what he was reading, or maybe he disagrees with what he was reading, or maybe he had not gone through the content of the letter before that day, and therefore he was being careful not to misread or mispronounce or miscommunicate what is contained in that proposal for additional 6.2 trillion appropriation supplementary budget that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is asking for. So for me, the body language of the Senate President says a lot about where we are in terms of the finances of our nation and the approach that we are taking, both the executive, you know, of course, symbolized by the president, and those who will approve if it is suitable. Absolutely, and so it is an uncomfortable thing to deal with. You are moving the budget, because this is into two parts before we come to the windfall tax on forex gains. You're moving a budget from 27.5 trillion to 33.3 trillion.
Yes.
And the additional 6.2 trillion that you are proposing, half of that will be spent on what we don't know, recurrent. It's only the other half that will be spent on infrastructure. What infrastructure are we talking about that you didn't capture last December when you proposed the budget, the biggest budget ever for the
in our
country?
history?
I mean, what has changed?
And what have we actually seen come out of the budget that was rushed through in December?
Many of them didn't quite. You remember
Yes.
Jaribe, what he said that he didn't.
I did not scrutinize
Exactly.
the bill. So,
how
and now
are
we're
we
having
sure?
another rushed,
Yes.
because again, this is, and I think that something this shows, because people are saying this is a rubber stamp Senate, this is a rubber stamp legislature.
Isn't that obvious?
It is that, for a senator to come and speak out about the issues in the country, and then for him to lose his position, Senator Ali Ndume, and lose his position as the chief whip within the Senate, where we have a letter from a party chairman being read on the Senate floor. I wonder, again, what privileges that Abdullahi Ganduje has as the chairman of the APC to have his words read out on the Senate floor. You are a party man, you are not an elected official. We need to actually hold our offices and our office holders to a certain standard.
What will we not see?
Yes,
in this current
how
Assembly,
low would the bar go? Because one thing that it's so bizarre for me is that the Senate President Godswill Akpabio seems to be very uncertain, as you said, when he reads his letters, but with certain sentences and utterances, like his utterance to Senator Natasha Akpoti.
The nightclub thing, that is
yes,
not a nightclub?
that this is not a nightclub.
He knows how to couch his words when it comes to inanities.
Yes.
But then when it is about the real situation, it looks lost, and uncoordinated, which speaks to, again, the state of our finances. And I think that for me, maybe I understand where the position of the president. Things are dire. He's desperate to raise money. That is understandable. But if you're desperate to raise money, what are you spending the money on?
People need to see results.
Exactly.
Because it's not a bottomless pit of money. It's not. You've been telling us that we should tighten our buckles. We're going through hard times.
We can't see that with the government functionaries.
Exactly.
That's where the disconnect is, and that's why a lot of people are not comfortable with what is going on. You asked how many budgets are we running. You remember that we have Dr. Nnameka Obiarori here the other time, and he broke down the issues, about are we running 4 budgets concurrently or are we running 3? Don't forget that the supplementary budget from 2023 is still on for the last 6 months of the year. So in effect, if this budget is passed, it is obvious that we will be running at least a minimum of 3 budgets at the same time. Maybe economics will argue that at the end of the day, it is one budget but broken down into series, because of course the argument will be that the 6.2 trillion being requested for is part of this year's budget, is just supplementary. That's fine. But then how come you are now bringing what you couldn't spend, the supplementary from last year that you are now running in 2024?
And then in another 5 months, we're going to expect the 2025 appropriation.
Absolutely.
If
not earlier.
If not being sent to the legislative arm. I think one thing we do need to hold people, I believe that we need to hold more and more accountable is the legislative arm of government.
To do their job.
To do their job. It does feel very disappointing. It does seem that the legislative arm is they're not performing their oversight functions properly.
I think it was Senator Shifso Asani who put it in perspective. When you have the leadership of the National Assembly that appeared handpicked,
yes,
unlike what we had when Saraki was the Senate president, this is what you get. And it is appalling, given that there's no, it doesn't look like the interest of the people is at the heart of what the legislature is doing. The executive will always want to present things that will favor them.
Yes.
The first line of action to hold them responsible, because you are, that is your duty, basically, is the National Assembly. Even before the media, even before the civil society, even before the generality of Nigerians. But it looks to me like this National Assembly is not doing enough. Maybe it won't be fair to say that they are failing but it appears to a lot of people that they're not are doing a very tidy job of what is going on. I'm sure that when we get to the newspaper review, we will have a little bit more to say on the windfall tax and how this is already disrupting, the banking sector, and there might be consequences, given that you can't have, laws that are retroactive. I mean, just like you said, where won't you go and look for money, to go and look for tax? Are you going to tax us, out of existence? Is this part of what you agreed with the Labour, for example?
It also doesn't, it feels very out of line with this idea of building a stronger economy. We're in the middle of banks are supposed to be consolidating. We're raising, the capital. It seems to be incoherent for me, incoherent policy decisions coming out of the executive.
I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of this administration, policy incoherence.
Yes, please be coherent. Please let the different parts work together. Because beyond that also, we have an executive, and beyond the president, we have the president's appointees. What have they done actually with the budgets that they have been given for the whole year? We have ministers that are underperforming, No, it is
a whole load of them.
Who
would we say?
This is the biggest cabinet we have ever seen, and we do not have much to show for this bloated cabinet.
Sadly.
And so for me, with the president coming back to request additional funds, I think that report card that we were promised, I think we should see it, because I want to know how the president is giving half of his ministers a pass mark. I want to know who he's willing to increase the budget of based off of their performance.
Infrastructure will get 3.3 trillion out of the expected 6.3 trillion. Let's see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes.
All right, then we proceed. After months of deliberation and negotiations, the Nigerian government on Thursday this week announced a new minimum wage of 70,000 naira. The announcement followed a second meeting between President Bola Tinubu and representatives of organized labor. Our State House correspondent Adesua Homoruan reports.
It's 2:15 p.m. and representatives of organized labor and their affiliates arrived at the forecourt of the presidential villa. Inside the brown room of the president's office, the stakes are high. The meeting goes behind closed doors. After an hour, if the mood in the room was any indication, an agreement had been reached.
We're happy to announce today that both the federal government and the organized labor have agreed on an increase on the 62,000 naira minimum wage. The new national minimum wage that we expect Mr. President to submit to the National Assembly for legislation is 70,000 naira.
Beyond the new minimum wage, other concessions were announced, including the payment of withheld salaries of some labor affiliates.
First and foremost, that the review of this minimum wage policy has to be reduced to 3 years. That is, 5 years is too long a time to get any minimum wage review. And of course, he promised and asked that the Minister of Finance, coordinating economy and budget and the economic planning should make sure that they go back to books, because he has the discretion to look into of NASU, ASU, and SANU and all that, and so that their money should be paid.
But that is not all. There is also a boost, like Mr. President has assured, in ensuring that massive investment is going to be made in the area of infrastructure. There is also a deepening of the investment of the federal government in renewable energy. More money is going to go into the acquisition of more buses, the CNG buses.
Leaders of the labor unions took turns to explain their reasons for agreeing to a 70,000 naira minimum wage, down from their initial demand of 615,000 naira at the start of negotiations.
Rather than accepting on a figure that you wait for 5 years, it's like you have to now negotiate even 2 times within 5 years with a view to going up. That is one of the reasons, why we decided to reach where we are today, because of the proviso that, you can review in the next 3 years. The other one, we came with other issues in the basket, like the issue of Sanu, Nasu, and others, especially with that front by the Commissioner of Police, FCT. We brought it to Mr. President and talked on the need, for that matter to be addressed. And magnanimously, he asked the agencies concerned to work out the modalities for the payment of those people, those workers in the universities. You can see that we are taking this with mixed feeling because of the situation of the economy, but we have to move ahead.
Why this became a catch, because we from organized labor, we have been pushing that the issue of 5 years review is too much, that a lot of economic indices may have changed, because we are in an era where things are moving very fast in terms of both macro and microeconomic policies. But with also the caveat that this is going to be done every 3 years, 3 years, the next review will be 3 years, and after that pronouncement, we from Labour, just has been said that, well, we have received what the President has promised from both ends.
Labour had demanded for a living wage to reflect the cost of living crisis. The push for a new minimum wage began 2 months before the 2019 Act expired. The President then formed a 37-member committee from the government, private sector and organised labour to review the wage from 30,000 naira. In June, the committee completed its assignment and submitted the report to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, but the parties failed to reach an agreement. The federal government gradually increased its proposed minimum wage from 48,000 naira to 62,000 naira, while labour unions lowered their demand from 615,000 naira to 250,000 naira. Both proposals were forwarded to the President for final decision. Another nationwide strike may have been averted in Nigeria. The President is expected to transmit the new bill to the National Assembly next week. But it is left to be seen how the subnational governments and the organized private sector, who have raised concerns about paying beyond 62,000 naira, comply with the new law. From the presidential villa, Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
All is well that ends well. I mean, isn't that what they say? And it looks to me like with the three busas from the labor leaders, I think that maybe a new kind of relationship has been forged with the president and his team, maybe with the minister, but of course with the executive. Are people surprised? I will say so. Given the conduct of the leadership of the labor union right from the beginning, when they first proposed 615,000, which of course everybody thought was laughable, and then the diminuendo of the figures from 615 to 420 something, then 2 to 250, and then ultimately to 70,000 that they have now settled for now. I think that because they feel that they might have, it's a bit dramatic, they feel compelled to explain, this is why we settled down for 70, because all we've been hearing was that it is 250 or nothing. Maybe commendation would be in order that at least we are able to avert yet another strike action, given what happened to the national grid when they went on strike the other time. But of course, it's
the national grid has since collapsed, I believe. And
we don't know who responsible now. Well. Is it the Honorable Minister or who? But 70,000 won't be a bad start. We know for a fact from figures, not only from Labour, but from researches, everywhere, that for an average Nigerian worker, it will take you a minimum of, given today's realities, a minimum of 230,000 naira to about 270 to have a vestige of, of decency. And you're not talking about, a living wage. You're not talking about somebody with a vehicle or with a house or anybody paying mortgage. We're talking about very minimal, basic living expense. Yeah. But then 70,000 is more than double of where we're coming from. The only thing to now put into consideration is that where was inflation when workers were earning 30,000? Where's inflation today? How much was Naira when workers were earning 30,000? Where's the Naira today? The issues are dire, but then we can't say that they've not achieved anything.
Yes, I mean, I would say that it is more than double in terms of nominal value, in terms of looking at the numbers. However, if you look at the actual value, the absolute purchasing power of the Nigerian worker has reduced. It has more than halved. It seems like a dream to say that when President Tinubu entered office, that Naira was officially at 700 to the dollar, and now today, as we speak, it has gone above 1,500. It has more.
The 700 was even the parallel market.
Yes.
It was less than 500.
So when we think about it, it's the purchasing power of the Naira has reduced in the foreign market. If you say, okay, we don't spend dollars in Nigeria, we do import a lot of our food. We are an import-reliant country. Until we become a productive nation, until we shift from consumption, as so many have said, we are import-reliant. We are reliant on foreign exchange. We are reliant on a stable market. But even if we look at the price of food, as you said, food inflation is... We've had double-digit inflation since I could read and write, and so and the extent of the food inflation and inflation within the economy is such that when Goodluck Jonathan paid 18,000 naira, that was over $100. At 18,000 naira,
Correct.
you could buy rice.
Yeah.
Now, when Tinubu is going to pay 70,000 naira, that's less than $50. That's
right.
So the actual amount is that 18,000 under Goodluck Jonathan could actually
had more
meaning and had more
purchasing
value
power,
and had more purchasing power. And so right now, for me, I don't see anything worth celebrating. Seeing the three bosas, seeing the celebratory attitude, for me, it does not bode well. It is not a good result for the Nigerian worker. Perhaps it was a good result for the labor leaders. Perhaps it is a good result for the executive
Well, the
arm
private sector is saying that that's your own deal, that we can't afford 70. The private sector is saying so.
But it is not. But for the Nigerian worker, for the average Nigerian person, as you have said, 70,000 is not going to move the needle when we are literally saying that all we can afford in the private sector or the public sector is poverty wages. Then we have a serious issue in this country.
The situation is very dire, but then, a little step has been taken. Let's hope that the 3-year review plan will be something that they'll keep up with.
Well, as they're taking these little steps with wages, I hope they take even bigger steps with inflation and even bigger steps with actual
cost of living.
Cost of living crisis, not charity. It's not sharing of rights.
Not palliative. Not palliative economy.
We need a government that is actually proactive, that has a plan, that implements that plan and sees it through.
A lot more needs to be done.
Don't throw bags of rice at people. Treat the actual issues. Well, members of the House of Representatives have resolved to support the federal government with 648 million naira for 6 months by slashing their salaries by 50% to support food sufficiency across the country. The lawmakers also beg Nigerians to be more patient with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration is addressing hunger, unemployment, insecurity, and other challenges. Tunji Olanipekun reports.
With biting hunger in the land due to high cost of foodstuffs, coupled with insecurity and unemployment, the drums of another nationwide planned protest by Nigerian youths seem to have filtered into the ears of members of the House of Representatives. At Thursday's plenary, Isiaka Ibrahim, in a motion of urgent public importance, appealed to Nigerian youths to shun their planned protest over the current economic situation in the country, stressing that such an action would not be in the interest of the country and may lead to violence and loss of lives.
Appeals to the proponents of the proposed nationwide protest in Nigeria to consider a different path, a path of patience, dialogue, and collaboration to prioritize the line of peace and open channels of meaningful engagements this with the government.
As a sign of empathy with the masses, the lawmakers moved the motion calling on his colleagues to donate 50% of their salaries for the next 6 months to the federal government to help address hunger in the land. The motion got the blessings of many of the lawmakers who also appealed to Nigerians to avoid a repeat of the 2022 End SARS protests.
I'm moving that we amend that prayer to include that members sacrifice maybe.
Well, that is commendable by the House of Representatives. I'll say it's a good thing from our legislators for them to signal that they are sensitive to the plight of Nigerians by slashing their salary by 50%. But I also believe that if you can actually slash your salary by 50% for 6 months, you're probably overpaid, don't you think? I don't think most Nigerians will be able to slash their salary by 10% for 6 months and be able to go about their lives and pay their bills and fuel their cars and buy food at the end of the week. So I think this does, we do have a very expensive legislator. Our legislators are well paid, which is why we expect them to do an exceptionally good job when it comes to their oversight functions, when it comes to their legislative functions. This is a nice token from the members of our House of Reps. However, again, it does feel a little bit similar to the bag of rice situation where you are band-aiding a situation where you are charity. You are not charity. Actually, you do have a job, and I'd like to see you actually carry out your functions properly. I don't want to see my legislators just simply giving out charity. I do say it's commendable. It is good. Congratulations to them for being able to afford a 50% reduction for 6 months. However, that's not the work we have actually voted them in to perform, and I would like to see more performance-based results. I do not want to see charity because at the end of the day, too many people feel beholden to their elected officials, whether it be their senators, their members of the House, their governors, for charity, for their daily bread. In fact, people are hungry. And so I think it is good. It is a good signal. It shows that you know that people are in pain. However, I would like to see more actual work coming out of the House.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's mere symbolism, and I think it looks more like playing to the gallery than any serious attempt, at dealing with the issues on ground.
Yes.
And the key word that you've used there, I align with, is just a token. 648 million naira in 6 months, because this speaks to how much does a member of the House of Representatives earn?
Yes.
And I'm not talking about your basic salary. I'm talking about your total package. You recall that there was a gentleman in the House a few weeks ago who tried to break down how much he himself and his colleagues earned, and at the end of the day came back to say that is not what we earn. It is not up to 30-something million, that they're talking about. Don't forget that there was also another gentleman, Simon Karu, in 2019, who also said that aside our salaries, each member earns up to 9 million monthly. As at that time, given the allowances and stuff that you're dealing with.
They even get cars. They get
cars. They get when you travel out of Abuja or travel out of all sorts of allowances. So how much is coming out of your salary, which is your basic salary? How much is that? I don't think that as nice. As commendable in quote as that might seem, I'm not so sure that will affect each member of the House of Representatives as it will affect you, or affect their drivers, or affect their legislative aides if they were to forgo half of their salary. So, those are the issues. Yes, I mean, this is something, but then where does it go to? Where does this less than 1 billion naira go to deal with the quantum of issues that average Nigerian is dealing with?
And I really appreciate that we're very aligned on this, because it is actually, for me, distressing. It is absolutely distressing that a lawmaker's solution to the food crisis and food inflation and hunger in the land is charity. You have a job. If my doctor decided that the answer to me, if I go to my doctor and I'm ill And my doctor just simply prays for me. That's what I go to church for. You're my doctor. I need you to do lab tests. I need you to write a prescription. I need you to, you know, take a blood sample, and I need you to give me medication. I need you to do your job. Because you're failing. If you are failing at your job, if you are not doing your job, then what use are you to me? If I want prayers, I will go home, I will pray. I will go to my pastor. I will go to my religious leader. I do not go to my doctor for spiritual intervention. I go to them for medical intervention. We cannot go to our legislators and our lawmakers for charity work. I need you guys to actually have a plan and do your jobs and do them properly. Do them with thinking, do them with policy, do them with implementation, see it through. Because right now,
and don't make laws. Don't be the chief beneficiaries of a system that is not working, because that's what people are complaining about. So what happens in December when your 6 months will have elapsed? You return to your 100%, you know, and then the 648 million that you have donated to government will cease. What if the situation is a lot more dire after December? You know, I mean, people will say that a little is better than nothing, but then this is not how you deal with serious situations of cost of living crisis. All right, that's a wrap on the week that was segment. But before going to our first guest, let's take a minute or two to bring you up to date with a couple of stories making the rounds. And on Friday, flights were grounded, banks knocked offline, media outlets off air, in a massive disruption that affected companies and services around the world, highlighting the serious challenge associated with dependence on software from a handful of providers. Cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike said that the issue believed to be behind the outage was not a security incident or cyber attack. It said the system was sent an update which had a bug in it, causing a problem with Microsoft's Windows operating system. CrowdStrike said it was only the Microsoft operating system that was affected, though it didn't happen on every Microsoft Windows system.
Well, the International Criminal Court of Justice, the ICJ, has issued an advisory opinion finding Israel's decades-long occupation of the Palestinian territories to be unlawful and should be brought to an end as rapidly as possible. Delivering the court's findings, the ICJ president, Nawaf Salam, said that Israel must make reparations to Palestinians for damages caused by its occupation, adding that the UN Security Council, the General Assembly, and all states have an obligation to not recognize Israel's occupation as legal. The decision follows a request in December 2022 by the United Nations General Assembly for the court to give its view on Israel's policies and practices towards Palestinians and on the legal status of the 57-year-long occupation of Palestinian territories. Well, that's all on news making the rounds.